Hey everyone, I am thrilled to be with my friend Gary Ware on the Story Builder podcast. Gary, thank you so much for being with me.
Jim, thank you for having me. I know this is going to be a good time, so let's go.
Let's go. That's right. Before we dive in, I want to promote one thing about Gary Ware. Gary is an awesome trainer, speaker, coach, facilitator, and author. The author of the book Playful Rebellion, which is available. And I know, Gary, you are just so passionate about play. Everything you do just has this playful vibe, and there's so much fun kind of just it's part of your persona, frankly. To me, when I think of Gary, it's like I'm thinking of play and Star Wars and humor and fun and all these good things, and I love it. And so I'm just
Thank you.
thrilled to talk to you.
Yes, that's my vibe. That is what I aim for. I learned from a good friend of mine all about choosing joy. At the end of the day, we have a choice, and that is my choice. Even when life is a dumpster fire, I still aim to choose joy.
That right there, I feel like that could be put on a throw pillow.
Yeah, yeah,
you know
yeah.
that's so good. Now, let's be honest though, as we're working hard on things, we're building stories, we're creating things, not not often does stuff go exactly like you're wanting it to. And
Agreed.
that dumpster fire analogy is pretty fair, and things don't work out. I get that it's a choice, but I feel like, how do you get to that point if you're like, ugh, I'd rather give up. Maybe I can go do something else that's easier, or maybe I can give up on this story or this idea.
Yeah, it's easier said than done, my friend. It is a practice because as humans, we have this negativity bias. That's our
Mhm.
brain's job, is to keep us alive. So the things that happen to be negative, tend to stick to us like Velcro, and all the
Yeah.
good stuff slide right off like Teflon.
Yeah.
Um, and if we're honest with ourselves, if we really, really look at it and look at everything, is it as bad as we're making it seem? Probably not. When we reflect back in 5 to 10 years, we're like,
Right.
wow, that wasn't as bad. And so that's my compass. I look at it like that. I'm like, all right, you know what? In this moment, it's a bit challenging, and I want to give up. However, I still need to choose joy. And sometimes that choosing joy is the most minuscule thing that I can find.
Right.
The fact that, what? You actually reminded me. I'm living, as of this recording, I am in San Diego, California, where it is about 60 degrees Fahrenheit. In the middle or the beginning of February, where
Uh-huh.
else in the US and all over the world, it is a lot colder. So, it could be worse.
It definitely could be a lot worse. And you also just mentioned before we hit record, you're like, yeah, I'm going to Tampa. It's going to be 80 tomorrow. And I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, that's just that's fantastic. I mean,
Yeah.
just that warmer weather, even if it's just for a day or two, it's like that that's kind of encouraging in and of itself. You can feel a little better when you're not freezing to the bone.
No. And one other fact, I didn't know this, but a friend of mine told me about it, is that people that live in Southern California, because of the amount of sun that we get,
Mhm.
and that because we have mild weather and we can spend more time outside, the folks tend to, like, as far as like their sort of, scale, tend to be on more of the positive side. So,
That makes sense. That makes sense,
yeah.
being by the water,
Yep.
having more sunshine. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, I normally ask folks about their favorite stories. And with you, Gary, I know some of your favorite stories because
Yes.
you are one of the biggest Star Wars people. I want to say fan, but that doesn't sound right. I mean, I remember your World Domination Summit speech where
Yes,
you were dressed as a Jedi
I
and you
was.
were out there, doing the choreograph and you're swinging the lightsaber and everything. Have you always been a big fan of Star Wars?
It's so interesting. As far back as I can remember, yeah, I have been, and it was one of those things where I believe it was Return of the Jedi was the first thing I saw in the theaters, and I was very young, when I saw that, and it's so interesting because I'm like, yeah, my parents just like, all right, we're going to the movie. I have
Right.
young kids that are 2 and 7,
Yeah.
and my 2-year old, I'm like, no, no, I'm not taking you to the movie theater. Like it is wild,
Right.
and so the it was a different time back in the '80s, and so that was like my intro to it. I had the Star Wars figurines and stuff like that. And
Uh-huh.
then when the prequels came out, I was teenage years, and so I got into
Right.
that. Say what you will about it, but like again, I love to just immerse myself in that world and just be part of that for a moment. And yeah, it's awesome.
That's awesome. I love it. Now, in another episode, I spoke with Chris Vogler and also with John Booker, and they're very much knowledgeable about the hero's journey, which is seen so much in Star Wars: A New Hope. It's seen in other like incarnations, essentially in Star Wars, because it's just such a foundational piece of it all.
Mhm.
Have you like have you immersed into that far where you're like, okay, there comes Luke, okay, there's Obi-Wan, the guide, the mentor? Have you
Yes.
ever kind of went that far?
Yeah, of course. Once I learned
Of
about the
course.
hero's journey and how it just shows up, you can't
Mhm.
not see it.
Right.
And it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree. Now, of the Star Wars, do you have a favorite and why?
That's like saying, do you have a favorite child?
I know it's a great question, isn't it?
Because I like different, like even of the new stuff, I like different stuff of each one.
Okay.
Um, yeah, it's hard to put like so. I guess of each set, I I have like a favorite. I really like, and it's so interesting because when I think about it, like I think because I love resolution
Mhm.
and whatnot, I love Empire Strikes Back. Again, that's a really good one. Just because of the whole story arc there.
Right.
And then in the prequel one, I like the last one, the I guess number 3,
Revenge
just
of the
because,
Sith.
yeah,
Yeah.
Return of the Sith, because that was where we like saw Darth Vader become Darth Vader.
Right.
And there was again something about that of like wanting to know that backstory and to see it all like come to life. And then yeah, I don't know. Like there's all kinds of like I like all of them for different reasons. So I can't pick a favorite. I
That's
do
great.
so of the other Star Wars stories in there, I love Rogue One.
Yeah,
Like
I can see
that
that.
was like such an awesome story that was just set in this one little time frame, and you get to
Yeah.
see this one little segment.
Yep.
And then again, when Darth Vader shows up at the end, and you just see that scene, and he just
Right.
goes falls out like,
Yeah.
oh man.
Yeah. That's one of the best moments in the theater when you're like, "Wait, what?" And you just see the lightsaber light up and yeah, right? Right? Now, one thing, like, once you start getting into stories, I feel like it's almost like you just go deeper. You know what I
Yes.
mean? It's like once you start really looking at them and you start thinking about characters and plots and themes and all of that, it's so hard to kind of just stay surface level. Do you know what I'm saying? Especially
Yeah.
with Star Wars because it's so immersive. You're going to different worlds and planets and backstory like you
Right.
said, and Rogue One was like kind of a short story that they just added on just to really please the fans there. It
Yeah.
wasn't
It was so much
necessarily it had
fan
to
service.
happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so to your point, like really good stories. That's what I love. Really good stories. It brings you in. It brings you into that world, and then because our brain's always trying to connect the dots, we get curious about stuff. It's like, oh, what if this, and this, and not to go on too much of a tangent. I feel like how television is set up now, where everything is binge worthy. Like,
Mhm.
all right, we're gonna throw everything out. You're just
Right.
gonna binge yourself in it.
Right.
We don't get that moment in between things to just percolate. Like
Right.
think about other stories like Lost. I don't know if you ever got into Lost when it was on TV, But think about it.
Week every time.
Every
Right.
week. But
Yeah.
at my job where I got paid, we had a portion of our conference room dedicated to Lost, where we had like
Wow.
diagrams and stuff like that. And every week after
Wow.
the episode, we would have a standing 1 hour meeting where we would talk about the episode. We would talk about our theories. We would talk about where it's
Right.
going. And
Yeah.
it really allows us to like again get lost into it. Again, going back to Star Wars, in between each Star Wars was 3 years. We had 3 years to
Right.
like
That's a long
like
time. No
think about what
internet.
happened. Right? Again, we don't know what happened, and we're trying to think about the next one. And then we have like we're making all of these like sort of fan theories and stuff like that.
Right.
Like again, that's what I love about really good stories. And then now, because everything is just sort of thrown at you, we don't have that moment to like really, get lost in it and think about like what else. Just because it's just all spoon fed to us, and we binge it really quickly, and then it's over.
It's almost like there is no pause, there is no time away.
Yes.
It's just this will date you and I both, Gary, but it's almost like we're just fast forwarding through everything. I'm thinking of the old VCR
Yeah.
DVD
Right.
player where it's like we're just zipping along and there's no breaks whatsoever. So we're just moving so quick.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a great point because I remember the very first time, because I was a late bloomer in the Star Wars world because of just my age. I never seen it. The first time I saw it was when it was special editions in the theater.
Yeah. Came back.
And it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
incredible. And I was like, what happens? There's another month before it's released out in the theater for, Empire and for Return
Yes.
of the Jedi. So you're just kind of like on that cliffhanger at the end of
Right.
Empire. And you're like, what happened?
Yeah.
And I feel like you're absolutely hitting on something here because that time away from the material, the source, it's almost like we're creating our own fan fiction.
We are, yeah, and we
Right?
get like our brain gets a chance to like sort of process what we just saw, and then because we like it so much, like this is something that I've learned doing improv, in that there's something that the audience wants, but you have to give them what they really need. Like, and they even like, I think there's studies that show that if someone were to go to a movie and get pulled out before the end of the movie or something, they would like it more just because of that.
Yeah.
Like what happened. And then so I'm a performing improviser, and a lot of times, well, not a lot of times, one of like our core things is don't always give the audience what they want. Don't always solve it for them, because even though they want it, even though they're like, why don't you do this? What, and just like, I remember watching movies and like, oh my God, you need to do this. But it's the fact that we slow things down, we stretch things out, that really gets us to want it. And so again, I know like we want to binge, we want to know what's next, but having that pause, as much as it like hurts us because we want to be back in that, is better for us in the long run.
That anticipation, I think some folks call it the information gap, or it's that little hole that you want to plug with that what happens next. And it's like sometimes I think there's like we fill it in ourselves. We want to, or maybe like you said with your example with Lost, like you come up with theories and it's multiple theories and you talk to someone else and then you change your theory. And it's almost like more of a community of storytellers by default because you're having conversations about it. Whereas it's direct line when you're binge watching the whole season or, series or whatever. Like there is no way you can really, I mean, you could talk about it after the fact, but let's be honest, some of that's just going to blur together. You had no time to reflect, right?
Yeah. And that's where the cult following comes from, of again, building that community of us. Like, what do you think is going to happen? Like and maybe I'm just dating myself. Like I can't think of anything that has been around like in the Netflix age where everything's sort of binge worthy that has developed such a cult following. I think the last thing that had like super cult following, but it wasn't like, it still had sort of like big gaps, was like, I was thinking, I didn't get into it, but what was the one about meth? What was the meth?
Breaking Bad?
Breaking Bad. Like I feel like that has a cult following,
True.
and again, that still had like gaps and stuff like that.
Right.
I think about The Sopranos, big cult following.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Totally
uh,
agree.
what's the one with again, another one that I missed the train on, because these are all the things that happened when I had kids, and like I just sort of missed it.
It's fair.
The one
Totally
with
fair.
the kings and stuff like that, that had the huge ass books, uh
Lord of the or not Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones and stuff
Yeah.
like that. Again,
Yeah.
they have these huge gaps in between,
Breaks.
and allows people again to like
Right.
think about stuff. So anyways, like I feel like
Yeah.
stuff now, because we're we're so used to binge watching, and the fact that they just like throw everything out, it really it takes away from the experience. I know, like as a fan, we want it right now, but again, from the
Right.
storytelling standpoint, like yeah, we need to. And I think about these shows, and I know from a fact, like Lost, when they were talking to like some of the creators, they were looking at those fan theories, and
Right.
that was helping them, like sort of write some of the stuff. And yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great point. I mean, it's almost like the older message boards, and they're
yeah,
finding
right,
all these fans, and ooh, hey, that's a good idea. And it's like they're mining for the gems, right?
yeah.
That's really funny. That's so good. Now, I have to ask you again. I'm sure I probably missed something on this, but because I know I kind of opened it up with you, and you said choose joy
Yes.
even when that's really hard. And this kind of connects with the idea of pausing and breaks. Like you mentioned before, like burnout is real,
Hmm.
and it's a challenge that so many of us face. I mean, honestly, Gary, today it's like I published a new novel today, and I'm like, um I got to keep going. I got to work on the next one. And I'm like, push publish. Oh, go work on this other thing right here. And there wasn't much break because of the way I was doing it. And I'm like, this seems like kind of the recipe for burnout when it's kind of a go 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 mentality. I mean, I
Hmm.
literally kind of thought that, and I was like, "Oh, I can do this. Be tough, you know."
Yeah, and that's so common, even when we are doing the things that we love, like writing novels or creating stories.
Mhm.
Our our bodies are still bodies,
Right.
and we are not great at predicting our energy levels and our ability to continue to do the work. I burn myself so many times, and I know about this, and it's again very challenging, because we think like, oh yeah, I love this, I'm in it.
Yeah.
However, like our capacities to withstand all of that, we only have so much. And I like to say, slow down so that you can do more, but it needs to be intentional, because if it's not intentional, we just have
Absolutely.
just because there's so much going on,
Yeah.
and and whatnot, we have bad habits of just jumping into the next thing, jumping to the next thing.
Right.
And it's just because we get this, it's almost like a drug, in a sense that we get this high, we finished it, and then our body's like, oh, what's next? I need that high
Yeah.
again. All right,
Oh yeah.
need to jump into the next thing.
That's a great point. I mean, I was literally feeling that earlier today, Gary. I was like, this is weird. This is different. What's going on? And I was like, did I have way too much coffee? Debatable, but I was feeling all of that, and I'm kind of like, okay, it's almost that parable or tale of the tortoise and the hare,
Hmm.
where you know we've got so much going on. Being intentional and going slower is definitely a way to sustain a lot longer. And also, Gary, it's worth mentioning, I have a family, you have a family. Even if you don't have kids or a spouse or a partner or something, it's still there's so many external things going on. Um, how can we kind of gauge our mental energy any better?
Well, one, we have to be honest with ourselves that we're not great at judging our
Back to that, we
capacity.
don't know what we're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, we think we have
Yeah.
enough energy. We're like, oh yeah, yeah, like you said, I'll just push through it. Yeah, it's fine.
Right.
And then, if I'm being honest with myself, at one point I was able to do that, but I'm a bit older,
A little different in your 20s, isn't it?
yeah, right. And so we have to just be honest that, it is different.
Yeah.
And once we are real with ourselves, and there is maybe like a mourning, we have to mourn that, like, sort of past stuff, but
Mhm.
we have to be intentional, like, because again, our body's going to want to go, go, go. And we have to put in breaks. Like one of the things, because I travel a lot for my work,
Mhm.
and I come back and I think, oh, I just jump back into whatever I was doing before. And that ends up like not working out very well because again, body readjusting to a new time zone and all this other
Sure.
stuff,
Jet lag.
plus
Mhm.
processing like what just happened and jumping back into it. Um, Again, do that, you know, 2 or 3 times over the course of a quarter. Like you will end up like wondering, like, why am I tired all the time? Well, and so one of the things that I have to do now is when I book a trip and I put everything, because everything's in my calendar. Like if it's not in my calendar, like it just doesn't exist.
Right.
It sucks that that's the way, but hey, I just need to be honest with myself. Like if it's in the calendar, it happens. If it doesn't,
Right.
and so I literally now I go like for this trip that I'm about to go on, I get back Friday, and it's interesting. So I'm on the West Coast. I'm flying east, but when I fly from east to west, um, I essentially gain a day for the most part. And so
Wow.
I used to be like, oh, I'm gonna get home and it's gonna be early. So, why not like jump into something like no, like it is still blocked off on my calendar that
Fair. Yeah.
I am gone
Yeah.
like that day. And then fortunate for me, like it leads into the weekend. But old me would have been like, oh, that's a day of work.
Yeah. Get back in, dive back in, right?
Yeah. Because yes, there are things that when I'm gone are on pause and I'll need to sort of jump into that. And that's up to me to like make sure that I, you know, realize what those things are and put those things early into the calendar for early next week so I can sort of deal with those things. However, yeah, I've learned the hard way of like jumping in straight into something and then end up getting sick. Or the other thing too is with travel like you could get sick, and so I
For
book all these
sure.
things and then end up coming back and then I'm sick,
Yeah.
and then I don't have a chance to rest and fully get better.
Right. Right. That's a great point. So you're kind of almost like, would you even say having a buffer day
Yeah.
for when you travel? I know you, I mean, I know we're both mutual friends with Mike Vardy. He's always been a preacher for that,
Yes.
having that buffer day, especially just to reacquaint yourself, just to get
Yes.
back into the swing of things. Now, let me ask you this, Gary, because the travel, you have a lot of fun, you do a lot of play, a lot of improv. How does recharging look for you?
Yeah, it's different. It depends on the situation. Uh, for me, lately, I've been focusing on getting quality sleep, and it's so interesting to say this because maybe like 10 or so years ago, I'd be like, oh, you know what? I can essentially burn the candle at both ends and be fine. That is not the case now.
Right,
And
right.
I again my oldest is 8, so for the last 8 years, I really miss sleep.
Fair.
And so
Fair.
knowing that it is not, is random and things happen, like sick kids and kids just jumping into your bed and
Sure.
calling it home and stuff like that in the middle of the night, all these other things. So what I've had to do, all these things, I had to be intentional, and I'm like, it's funny because I I don't like a lot of restrictions. I like a lot of freedom, but at the same time, I'm coming to terms that to get the freedom, I need to put these sort of guardrails and buffers in there and
Both
stop.
sides, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and stop like uh, resisting myself. And so it is putting rituals in place, and say I call them rituals because it sounds better. Uh, you
Yeah,
know, Rituals in place so that I can wind down, so that when I get into bed and I go to sleep, even though I'm not getting as much hour wise as I would like to, I know that I'm not going to be in my bed like sort of spinning my wheels like for
right.
hours and get less sleep, or I'm all like sort of wired, and then again the amount of sleep that I the quality of sleep is not that great. So that's one thing that I've been practicing and working on is
Yeah.
getting better quality sleep, and I find that that does help overall.
Sure.
As far as being able to jump into the day, and with focus. And then the other things too is, and this is, I again accepting that, for the time being, like my life is my kid's life, and so my form of rest is just having that space to just do whatever they want to do.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. I mean, as a father, that's really good. That's something you don't hear very often either.
Yeah, and
You
yeah, I had
know?
to come to terms with it because there was a part of me that was like sort of fighting it, thinking that I can do everything. Of like, oh yeah, I can be active in the things that they want to do, and I want to do these things. And then I was realizing, like, I was like sort of fighting against myself, and I was getting resentful when I
Yeah.
wouldn't be able to do the things that I want to do.
Yeah.
And now I'm not saying that I just threw all of my sort of passions and hobbies out the window.
Right.
I scaled down, and I'm focusing on a few things that like really bring me joy, and like when I get a chance to do those, it's like, all right, it's awesome. And then on top of that, being able to be present for my two dudes, has also been awesome.
That's great. That's so great. The And you're playing too with your kids. That's a given by
Yeah,
default, right? I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah.
that's what I
They
mean,
can be
you don't have
jerks, but it's still, you know.
that's fair too. But I mean, but you don't have to tell kids to play. They pretty, instinctively they're
Yeah,
doing that.
they know what's up. Yeah,
Yeah.
they tell me I'm playing wrong, and that's where like I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, anyways, so that's
Well, all these kids have lots of opinions, right? They love to
yeah,
tell
of
dad
course.
what's up
Yeah,
sometimes,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Which is fine. Like, and I love that for them, and that's going to be very helpful for them as they get older. It's just
That's true.
in this moment, it's just very frustrating,
Well, each age is a
right?
whole nother ball game too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mine are a little older than yours, so yeah, it's like I have a 12 and a 15-year-old, and
Oh
I'm
my
like,
gosh,
what is going on
I can
here?
only imagine. I have nieces and nephews that are and that and my sister tells me stories, and I'm like, oh my gosh,
Yeah, they're probably all true, I guarantee it.
yeah. She's like, enjoy this moment, and I'm like,
Yeah,
oh yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's
It
that's
sounds
fair.
cliche, but I'm like, okay, I get it.
Okay, I guess. Um, so I know you mentioned too, improv is a huge passion of yours. It's something that you use in your workshops. It's something that, you know, you've been into it for quite a while. And that was kind of also part of your recipe from burnout, right? Taking improv, part of your story.
Yes.
So that sounds pretty daunting to someone who's never done it.
Yeah.
But share a little more about it, because I think
Yeah.
I think it's I think it's more in our heads because hey, this is something new versus it being really difficult to do.
Yeah. Exactly. Let me ask you a question. When you think, because you said it seems kind of daunting. When you think about daunting, like what about it seems daunting? Because I want to make sure that I frame my answer in a way that
Sure.
is helpful instead of me
Right.
just being a fanboy
Right.
of the art.
Right. Um I would say anytime you're working with a larger group of people that you've never worked with before in a impromptu exercise, for me personally, I would like to gauge and be like, this is you can go up to this line, but don't cross this line. Like I want to know some parameters and like, my experience with most improv is whose line is it anyways, because that show is hilarious and it was on for
Yes.
years. And I'm kind of like, well, where are we going with this? Like if I did it with you, Gary, I wouldn't worry because it's like, well, Gary's gonna help guide me. I know Gary. But if you don't have any experience with these other people,
Hmm.
is it something that could offend? Is it something that's just lame? I mean, nobody wants all dad humor all the time, all dad jokes all the time. And that would probably be my default mechanism, Gary, as a dad,
Yes.
right? And I'm kind of like, that would bore me. So,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? Where it's like you not knowing kind of where you fit in would be the challenge for me with improv.
Perfect. Okay. So let me say a few things first. For me, improv is like the performance of improv is very playful. For me, just because I have a background in music. So I used
Mhm.
to perform music. I was
Mhm.
in band. I was in high school band, and so I found that when I took this improv class, and I'll talk about like the things about improv and how, like, especially when you don't know about it and you don't know the other people, how like it brings people together. I'll talk about that in a moment. But for me, the moment I took that and then I started seeing the performance aspect, it brought back being in music, and it was like, all right, you know what?
Nice.
I don't have the ability to, practice instruments and stuff like that like I used to, but this is the next thing. And so it became of like that form of play, and it drew me into it personally.
Nice.
So there's that. And so when I get a chance to do that, it just allows me to just let go, and it's just, I'm in the zone. I'm just like in this flow, and I don't have to think about anything, and it's just awesome. That isn't for everyone. Like I tell some people, I tell people everyone should take an improv class once. However, you don't have to get on stage. You don't have to do the
Makes
performance
sense.
aspect if it's not for you.
Sure.
So there's that. So now getting back to the aspect of the class, because and this is one of the reasons I love teaching improv, especially intro to improv, is I
Mhm.
love seeing these people that are from different walks of life, different sort of personality types, from the introverts, the extroverts, the
Sure.
ambiverts, different humor styles, all
Right.
come together and co-create something. And the way that it works, or the reason why it works, is there are guardrails. There are sort of buffers, and we have what we call agreements. These are the reasons why we're able to co-create. And the first thing that people learn very quickly is that it's not about being funny. If you try to be
Mm,
funny, like, yes,
that's
you see
interesting.
whose line is it anyway, and then you're like, wow, that is so funny. However, if you try to be funny,
Right.
because we do have different senses of humor and
Right.
things like that, it ends up not working well. If you want to be funny, go be a stand-up comedian, because then you're by yourself.
Right. You control
Yeah.
it. Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's the first thing. It's not about being funny. And then the next thing is that is very freeing after a while, because we have this sort of judgment portion of our brain is like, oh my gosh, that was dumb. Like, oh, they're going to judge me.
Right.
But the thing of improv, and the reason why it works, is that there are no mistakes.
Oh.
Like one of our improv principles, there are no mistakes. Everything's a gift, which means, Jim, if you want to be, Mr. Dad Joke, as your co-creator,
Mm.
by the laws of improv, I have to support that, accept that, and help build on that.
Wow, that's funny. That,
You
that
know,
sounds very cheesy.
yeah, exactly.
We're just
Um,
gonna elevate the dad
yeah.
jokes
Like,
even
you know
more.
what? Jim, like, you had the courage to, what we call, initiate, put an
Mhm.
offer out there. Who am I to just, that's stupid? No.
Swat it down. Right.
And
That's
then,
a good point.
so I accept, and that's how we are able to build stories. And that's why people come up and say, was that scripted? Because even when we make a mistake, like maybe like we might make a sort of like pop culture reference mistake,
Mhm.
but in that moment, in that universe that we're co-creating, that
It's
is
fine.
correct.
Yeah.
So I will justify and build on it.
Right.
And again, as you get more proficient in that, it comes naturally and you can do it faster.
Right.
People, like, the best compliment I can ever get is someone would say, are you sure that's not scripted? Are you sure you
Yeah.
all didn't just plan ahead what you
Right.
were going to
Right.
do and
It's
just come?
fast. Yeah.
And so, but in the beginning, yeah, that first class, it's awkward. And then the other thing that we do is we celebrate mistakes. And so, right now, oh, right now I'm on week 5 of my the class that I teach.
Okay.
Week 1 and 2, everyone was a little bit shy.
Sure.
It was kind of awkward. But again, they were there for it, and they would start to realize, like, oh, I can say that. I'm like, yeah.
Just showing
And
up.
then I
Yeah.
asked them, I said, now that you're realizing that we're here to support you, and your first initial things are going to be crappy. Just like, again, you talk about this with writing stories. Just say it. Like, just
Right.
don't hold back. Like,
Right.
just say it. And then afterwards we can reflect on it. It's like, you know what? Hey, I applaud you for saying it. And guess what? There are other things that you can do. So when we do this again, when we run these back again, just realize that your our goal here is to listen and work off of each other. And a lot of times we're in our head trying to think of what's the best thing I can say.
Right. That's exactly, and that's perfectionism, really, if you
Yes.
start honing in.
And so then over time we learn to let go. And there's a lot of research now getting to the neuroscience and stuff like that, that with practice over time, our brain goes into the state of flow a lot
Oh yeah.
faster. And when you're in that state, you turn off the judgment centers of your brain. So you're literally not judging yourself, and you're allowing yourself to just create in the moment. And wouldn't everyone love that feeling? And that is like
Pretty
something that
amazing. Absolutely.
I love, and that's what keeps me coming back, because not all improv shows are hits. You know, some
Right.
like especially if you go and see like true improv frequently, not just like Whose Line Is It Anyway? Like you'll see some shows and you'll
That was almost a bad example, Gary. I know, because
no,
they record 10 hours and they air 1 hour,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Or
They record a
45
lot.
minutes with commercials, probably. So
Most people don't realize that. Most people, and
yeah.
another thing, not to just expose, show the wizard, behind the curtain, is that a lot of those things, they practice these bits so that they come across very polished.
Over.
And anywho, but those people that are on that are amazing improvisers. Like to
Top
see
of their
them.
game. Oh yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm not discrediting any of their skills.
Right.
But again, this is for TV, and so
Yeah. It's not newbies.
yeah, and they want the best, but they are able to produce that at such a high level that they can do this.
Right.
But the cool thing that I love about performing improv and co-creating these stories is one week we would just be like, wow, we like leave and we're like shocked. Like that's what I love the most, is being delighted in the moment of what we just created. Like to just be like
Right there.
playing off of each other in the moment, and then what we discover, and that's where the humor comes from, is discovering something in the moment of
right together.
We like to say, and this is from a gentleman, his name is Keith Johnstone. He's like coined as the godfather of improvisation. And
Okay.
he says with improv, you're jostling between daring to be ordinary and daring to be interesting. So the daring to be ordinary is that, say we're in a scene and, we're roommates. What is something that a roommate would say? Like, what is the least common
What fits
denominator?
the context?
Just to say it. Like,
Yeah.
instead of like, I need to say something witty and funny because I want this laugh. Like, no, like, all right, what would a roommate say in this situation? Just say it. And, and then great. And then also the dare to be interesting is, yes, once you get like sort of used to that, what is something still in context of like what we're doing, but like maybe just up a notch. But it takes practice. And I tell my students in the beginning, just work on dare to be ordinary, because we're working of just responding in the moment.
Right.
And then you'll get the interesting thing will come.
I find it interesting as you're talking more about improv. There's so many similarities. Writing is writing, stories are stories. And I'm thinking like half of the stuff you just said, it's only just a slight variation between writing a novel. I mean, yeah, you're working, you're showing up, you're practicing these routines and habits, and it's setting a scene is the same. Like it doesn't matter if it's on paper, on camera, or improv. It doesn't really matter. You have to know where you are, what you're doing, who are the characters, all those real basic things, and you can just
real
kind of
quick
build from there.
That is what I teach, like in a scene. Like we do a thing called 3-line scenes, and
Okay.
they only get 3 lines. One person
Mm.
initiates a line, the next person responds to the line, and then the other person finishes. And 3 lines, you get 3 lines. However, in those 3 lines, after they're done, I quiz the people watching to say, what was the relationship between those two characters?
That's good.
Where are they? And what's the so what? And a lot of times they miss those. So we're like, all right, cool. Next time, just remember. And it seems very robotic because again, you get 3 lines and you will say things in this exercise that you wouldn't say normally in real life. Like I wouldn't go up to you and say, my brother that I love so dearly, thank you for meeting me here at Starbucks. Like that's just like, we wouldn't say that in normal dialogue.
Not
but again,
typically.
we're getting like, it's very robotic so that they get in their head of like knowing what's the relationship between us two, where are we, and what's going on. Because again, it's all co-created in the moment. And so a lot of not good improv happens because there's ambiguity. I don't know what our relationship is. I have no idea where we are, and I don't know what's going on. And so by doing this, activity and it's very formulaic and it seems very robotic, you get in the habit of realizing, oh, I don't know the relationship. And so if that's the situation, just name it. It doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter
even if
what
you're
it is.
wrong, who cares? Just name
You're
it.
not wrong. And so this,
Yeah, exactly.
so someone may think that, oh, we're coworkers, but if you just endow, like, I might think we're coworkers, but if you just endowed me, as siblings, that's what it is.
Right.
I might think that we're in a break room, but you just said we're in the kitchen. All right, that's what it is. And a lot of times people stay in their head. They think, oh, like when I asked them about a scene that didn't go where, like, I'll ask them questions. Where did you think you were? Oh, I thought this. Where did you think? Their same partner. Where did you think? Oh, I didn't know. Again, that's where the ambiguity happens because I think, oh, Jim has something. I'm not going to step on his toes, but I really don't know how to respond because I'm waiting for him to give me some stuff. And so I just say it. But that's the beauty. And that's why we co-create, because once you say it, now we're building this world.
Being decisive, Gary, is one of the challenges for me as a writer. And so much of what you're saying is resonating with me in a different kind of way, because it's like, hey, look at this example. Be decisive and be okay with it. And don't you worry about changing it up, because once you were decisive, you make that decision. If you start reneging on it, trying to switch things up, guess where that leads you? Overthinking, and you don't have much to show for it either. But being decisive, just saying, hey, we're in the break room. Hey, we're coworkers. We're not, we're not on a train, and we're not brothers. It's completely not even close.
Mm-hmm.
So now that might change some of the dialogue. It might not. It might, sometimes brothers are distant. Sometimes coworkers are distant. I mean, so it kind of, but it's really interesting where you can say, look, just be decisive and run with it. And that right there, Gary, I mean, that honestly could be a big takeaway, where it's like, then you have some freedom to create. And even if it's not what you wanted in the grand scheme of things, in the context of a story or book or whatever, you get to revise it. You can edit it and make it better. But improv, you don't get that luxury. You're just creating that moment and running with it.
And that's what's so beautiful with that. But some of the best sketches, so if you think of Saturday Night Live, Bad City, Key and Peele and stuff like that, they all started with like an improv bit that they just sort of riffed on. Then they were done, and then they said, oh, I love what I love about this. All right, cool. Let's start to tweak it. And so that's where, again, the difference between sketch writing and improv, and even improv and stand-up, it starts with like a suggestion, a little premise. We riffed on it, and then we went back and we tweaked it. And again, think about like any sort of art form, music and stuff like that. It probably happened like, all right, let's jam for a bit. Like, all right, cool.
Yeah,
boom,
exactly.
boom, boom. Wow, we're like, and I, again, coming from a music background, and I was in a band, a lot of our songs started with like, all right, we're just going to riff on this. Yeah. And then we're like, oh, we're feeding off of each other. Yeah. All right, cool. Now, all right, stop. What do we like about it? Are we like this, and this? Or you know what? How about, we tweak this? All right, let's run it back again. And again, I think about writing and storytelling. If you give yourself, and this is what I talk about in like my classes, I said there is the clown and the editor. They can't coexist.
That's so good.
And with improv, we're in clown state. Just allow yourself to just be in this creative state.
Yeah.
And just go with the flow, respond in the moment, and see where it happens. It may it may not be where you want it to go. You may go to crazy town. That happens a lot. But again, the main thing, and the reason why this is important, is that you're co-creating with someone else. And sometimes, like on teams that I'm on, we have, like last week we performed, there were 5 of us. And in a given scene, there's probably like maybe 2 or 3 at a time. Mm-hmm. But think about that, 3 people on stage at the same time, co-creating something. So you have to be listening. You can't be in your head, like trying to think of like, what do I need to say? You need to listen. You need to respond what was given to you, because the audience, they see everything, they hear everything. So they're going to know, like we call them like missed gifts, like where you missed an offer, or where things get kind of awkward,
essentially. Yeah,
and stuff like that. Not that they're going to be like, oh, they're going to come to you after, what, in the third act of your scene, like where they said you were from Massachusetts, you didn't hear that, like you missed, But that's the difference between like something where like they're in with you and something like just feel it all. Again,
Yeah.
the cool thing about improv performance, the audience there, they're so forgiving. Like they're the most forgiving audience because
Makes
they know
sense.
it's co-created. They know it's made up on the spot, and they know that they probably can't do that. So they're like they come in like almost scared for you. Like, oh my
I could
god.
see that, like
And,
empathy wise,
yeah.
you know that it's all on the fly. Yeah, I could see
And
that.
and then when they see stuff come together, and like some of the best, again, this is where the comedy and the humor and the laughs come from, is when they can clearly see that one person thought one thing and then someone said something else, and then to see the connection happen to the other person and see them adapt, it is so funny, it's so satisfying,
Mhm.
and they love that. Or like my our last show, we like, again, we're all co-creating in the moment. um my seed partner, she not to get too much into the semantics, like the nuts and bolts of an improv scene, but basically we had a scene and she came in and tagged one of us out. And so when that happens is we're like transition in time. And so at first we were a little confused, and
Mhm.
it got very meta, and she like, this is a flashback. And so it was perfect for her character, and it was perfect like
Mhm.
as a meta thing, and the audience
Yeah,
ate that up. And
that's
it was
funny.
one of those things of like, oh, I see where we're going. And like the light bulb came on for all of us, and it was just hilarious for the audience, hilarious for
Watching
us.
everyone go, whoa, wow,
So,
that's
anyways,
cool.
but
That's
we
so
all
cool.
creating in the moment.
That's so cool. And I think too, Gary, as you're talking about it more and explaining everything, it's like I I'm really thinking most art is creative in a collaborative way, with very few exceptions. I mean, most of the time, especially stories that are, like you're working with an editor. Guess what? You're working with an audience then. And, like I'm talking to my beta readers, stuff
Mhm.
like that, where it's like there's a little more collaboration. It's almost a myth to think, hey, I'm creating this thing off here kind of in a silo and it's not connected to anything else. Um, it's a little more collaborative by default.
Yeah.
I mean, even like almost any kind of art, I'm thinking you could probably find a way where it's way more collaborative than we assume
Yeah.
sometimes.
Agreed.
And it's also cool because I think also when underlying tone, it's like we can be way better together in community versus kind of in isolation. Because I mean, you can write a great story, Gary, and
Yeah.
keep it off and not share it, but did does it really count if no one ever reads it but you? You know what I mean?
Right.
It's kind of like journaling, and I like journaling, but if you never share your story, it's kind of it doesn't reach
Yeah.
its potential. It's kind of like it's like a beautiful picture that you didn't show anyone else. It's like
I know. Did
it's
it
just for
exist?
you, and
Yeah.
it's kind of a little bit of a bummer, I guess.
Yeah. And yeah, there are things that are, yeah, just for you. But again, if you consider yourself an artist or creator, that's the point, right? You're creating to release it out into the world. And I know there's that fear of what are people going to think. But if you're honest with yourself, there's probably more people that are like, oh, yeah, yeah, thank you for this. I appreciate this. I needed
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, for sure. Now, Gary, I know you do the improv classes pretty regularly. Are you going to do another batch after you finish this current
Yeah,
class?
yeah, yes. So this at the theater that I perform at, Finest City Improv, here in San Diego. And yeah, we have the way that it works. It's 7 weeks, and then we have a week off, and then we start the next term. So we're in term one of 2025, and there are, I believe, 6 terms a year.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
Were you still doing them online, or you were just online for a while during
I was
COVID?
online for a while, and then for a while, I was a friend of mine. We were co-creating. It was an intergenerational improv
Mhm.
class, which was virtual. So we did
Okay.
what you would expect in a normal improv class, except our goal is to have a wide range of ages, and I think our
Yeah.
youngest at one point in the class, we had like a 13-year-old, and then like
Wow.
a 75, 80-year-old.
That's
And
incredible.
it was all on Zoom. And so we had to modify them so that they work in a virtual format.
Yeah.
And so that was a challenge in and of itself, and it was a fun
I can
challenge.
imagine.
And those
Yeah.
still go on. It's called Zoomers to Boomer Improv. It's just one of the things, again, as I talked about at the top
Right.
of, realizing that I only have so much capacity, and
Right.
those what happened with those would be in the middle of the week, from like 6 or 6:30 Pacific to 8:30 Pacific, once a week. And so um that was taken away from taekwondo with my son, and
Right.
bedtimes
Makes
and all those
sense.
other things.
Totally
And so
understand.
yeah, so
Totally
I had to
understand.
bow out with that. But Yael, who created, she still runs those.
Awesome. Awesome. Uh, how can anyone connect with you if they're like, hey, I'm interested in this improv, or maybe they want to work with you? They have a company and they're like, hey, I think our company could use a little more play.
Yeah. Well, my website's breakthroughplay.com. You can find all things Gary there, and where I'm going to be, and all kinds of stuff there. And then if you're on the social medias, I pretty much are on LinkedIn and then Instagram. Those are the two that I'm on regularly. So you can find me at Gary Ware on both of those.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being with me, Gary. Really appreciate you.
Yes, Jim. Oh my gosh. This was such a delight. Thank you for having me.
You bet.